back. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell helping to pass the GOP health care bill this week, but he could have a tough road ahead. 5 Republican senators have already said they are opposed to the measure. Joining me right now is Senator Jerry Moran. He is a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He also was the first lawmaker in Congress to offer legislation to repeal and replace Obamacare. Sir, it's good to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Maria, good morning. Good to be back with you. Sounds like we're going to have a big and busy week in the United States Senate.
It sure does. Can you tell us the status of the bill right now?
Well, I would guess that most members and senators, including me, are in that analyze, make sure we know what we're doing, see what the CBO score has to say. We have our work cut out for us in the next few days as we make certain that what the legislation includes is something that's satisfactory to us and to our constituents. I'm back in Kansas, as you can tell from the backdrop. I'm in Topeka, and I've been lots of places this weekend. And this issue, health care reform, repeal and replace Obamacare, it is the topic of conversation. And as a Kansan, particularly as somebody who represents a very rural state, we have some unique issues when it comes to health care, including how do we make certain that community hospitals in small towns across Kansas, physicians in our community pharmacy on Main Street, how do we make sure that not only is health care affordable, how do we make certain that it's accessible? We can't afford to have a plan that might put our health care providers in jeopardy either.
And one of the issues has been this expansion of Medicaid under Obamacare. What changes can be made? We know that 5 of your colleagues are pushing back, saying they oppose this bill, largely because of the expansion of Medicaid that continues to be in there. How do you wind that down to make everybody happy, Senator?
Maria, my take on this is that the commitment that was made was to repeal and replace. And so there's 2 components that I think we're all looking at. Does this sufficiently get rid of the things that Obamacare did that were damaging to health care and to people and to job growth? So it's the repeal side is one part, but the other part is the replace. And what can be done to make certain that, and the reason I think this is so important, while I would say that the healthcare system before Obamacare was far from perfect, and we ought to have been doing more things to make healthcare more affordable and more accessible without the Affordable Care Act, we need to get back to that point. And so in a sense, it's setting aside some of Obamacare. Does it sufficiently repeal? And then secondly, what do we do to replace it? And part of it is transition that you are talking about. The Affordable Care Act expanded, allowed states to expand. In fact, states were to expand. The Supreme Court determined that that part of the law was unconstitutional. So states made decisions as to whether or not they wanted to expand Medicaid in their states. And those states that expanded, Kansas is not one of them, but those states that expanded are insisting for their votes on this legislation that they are protected, at least for a period of time, from the cost of that expansion. From a Kansas perspective, in many ways, because we think the Kansas legislature and governor did not expand, we want to make certain that we're not being penalized in this bill, in this Senate bill, for not doing so, and the money is being shifted to take care of those that did expand. So many people, we have a long-term problem with Medicaid and its funding. It needs to be sustainable, and it's not over a long period of time. And so we want to make certain that those legislatures, those states that determine not to expand, and the providers that rely upon Medicaid and the patients that rely upon Medicaid aren't harmed because of that decision was made, as Congress in its work of trying to get votes takes care of those that did expand.
Yeah, I totally understand. So if you make one change to the Medicaid expansion, you perhaps alienate some other members who are willing to vote for it now. So how are you going to walk that balance? Will you be able to bring this for a vote this week?
Look, elections over a long period of time have been fought over Obamacare. And generally the message has been we're dissatisfied with Obamacare, make changes. It can go from making changes to repeal it. President Trump campaigned in his presidential election on the Affordable Care Act and its the need to make modifications or repeal.
Right.
And so this is a significant issue for Americans. And the question is, I don't know the answer to whether you can put that together. As President Trump said, This is very tough and difficult stuff.
Right. No, I understand, but this is central to the entire agenda, Senator, right? I mean, so America voted for an agenda to get executed, and that is a repeal and replace followed by tax reform. The president said he has to get health care done before he gets to tax reform, which will likely be after the summer. So this is going to be critical in terms of executing his entire agenda. The left and the critics of the president want to impeach him. They want to take back the House in 2018, and they will have a shot to do that if you guys don't get anything done. So the real question is, are you going to come together? Will you have the votes to bring this to the floor for a vote before the July 4th holiday, sir?
Maria, maybe I can be on your program next Sunday and I can tell you what happened, because this is still work in progress, although the leader of the United States Senate is very good at establishing coalitions to see that legislation passes, but it is still a lot of work to be done to determine whether or not it gets to 51 votes.
So what's your gut? Do you think it happens this week? What does your gut tell you?
My gut tells me this is very difficult in that, I hate to say this, but I just don't know whether the votes will be there by the end of the week. And like occurred in the House, it took a bit longer than was expected. But again,
would you
this
be willing,
is front and center for us, and I agree.
If you don't get the votes,
I agree with you that this is important for the agenda.
Right. If you don't get the votes and you don't try to close this out before the July 4th holiday, are you willing to forego your August recess to get your work done?
Absolutely. I think Congress has the responsibility of doing more work in a timely fashion than what we've been able to do so far. I think it's better than it was in the days gone by. We're working now 5 days a week generally. And we're in Washington, D.C. 5 days a week, and many of us are home with our constituents on the weekends. But if we can move on health care and tax reform and infrastructure, and it takes being in Washington, D.C. in August, let's do it.
Senator, good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks so much.
Maria, thanks.
We'll be watching the developments. Meanwhile, Eric Trump talks to us next about his father's first 5 months in office. Plus, he'll respond to the left's hostility toward his father and the rest of the Trump family. We're looking ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. Back in a moment.